Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I'm Gurleen Sethi, working as an associate director with Anderson UAE. Along with me, I have Aman.
Hello, hey everyone. I'm Amandeep and I work as an assistant manager with Anderson in the UAE. And
Yeah, so we have been a part of this UAE journey since its inception, and today we are here to discuss regarding a recent development, major development, I would say, which is the RCM on the electronic devices. So this decision gave some relief to various manufacturers, retailers, distributors of the electronic devices. In a way, like their working capital got blocked lesser. So as these industries work on very less margins, so even mere 5% VAT becomes a hindrance to their working capital. Another aspect of introducing this decision was to the stop the black marketing of these products. So now let's start our discussion today with the decisions and public clarifications issued in this regard, wherein Aman can just let us start and give us a start
yeah,
on
we'll
what
run them through
decisions.
the
Yeah.
timelines and
Yeah.
then the detailed discussions. So basically, once we start off with the timelines of these decisions and the guidance that have been issued by the FTA, the primary decision that we refer to in this PPT would be your cabinet decision number 91, which was issued in August 2023. And upon this issuance, it was stated it'll take around 60 days for it to come into effect, which was the go live date in the end of October, around the 30th of October. And post or actually before the go live date, we they also introduced the public clarification VATP 034, which was issued on the 8th of October. And then we also have the ministerial decision number 262 of 23, which was then issued on 25th of October 2022. Now, the ministerial decision itself speaks about parts and pieces of certain electronic devices. However, due to certain ambiguity in the decision itself, there was another public clarification which was finally released in the 2nd of December 2023. Now, if we move on to the next slide, which gives us some more information on the cabinet decision number 91. The cabinet decision number 91 basically talks about the application of the reverse charge mechanism on supply of certain electronic devices. Now, this requires certain changes in the tax positions that have been adopted by the consumers and the recipients of these electronic devices over time. There are changes in the accounting treatments, there are changes in the VAT treatments, along with additional compliance burden. Now, the definition of electronic devices has it's not, it has to be a broad definition as such,
Yeah.
but
We-
it does include mobile phones, smartphones, computer devices, tablets, and the parts and pieces that might be incorporated into these devices.
which is like another ambiguity still, because a
Still,
lot of
yeah,
businesses are not able to identify what all parts and pieces will be covered exactly.
exactly.
So we'll run you through all these details in our session. For the starters, we'll just start with the general implications of the cabinet decision number 91.
Yeah, so I think some of the primary implications that come forth right away are obviously changes in the accounting treatments,
Yeah.
right? Now, the responsibility to account for that, if in case the goods, meet the electronic devices are sold or for purpose of resale or, for use of production of electronic device, then the supplier should not charge any due tax going
Yeah.
forward, and the responsibility is now shifted to the
We,
recipient. So that is something that needs to be taken care of. Accordingly, your system will also be
Yeah.
impacted. You'll
So
have to account
one,
for them.
I would like to add one thing here. So the main focus here is on the registered recipient. So the recipient now needs to be registered for VAT. Then only will this decision will be applicable, and only the resale, production, or manufacturing of the further of these products, if this activity is being taken by the registered recipient, then only the RCM will be applicable.
Great. Yeah. So I think other than the requirement of the recipient to sort of account for these purchases under RCM, there are the additional focus lies on the documentation
Yeah.
that is required to be met and the compliance. So if we move on to the next slide,
Yeah. So the next slide, we are trying to cover what will be the documentation from buyer and from the seller perspective. So from the recipient perspective, the recipient needs to share a declaration wherein they have to declare that these products which they are going to buy from the seller will be used either for the resale purpose or for further manufacturing or production of some other electronic devices. And along with that, the second declaration, which is the main one, they have to declare that they are registered for VAT with the FDA, along with mentioning their TRN number. And then coming on to the supplier point of view, the supplier need to have registered this all declarations before the date of supply. So this is a mandatory thing, like before supplying the goods, like before hitting your date of supply,
Mhm.
these declarations mandatorily needs to be with the seller. And the second one being, this is again a very crucial one. The seller needs to verify the TRN of the recipient in order to further sell these products under RCM to the recipient. Then moving on to the next slide, which is a public clarification number 34, which further clarifies this decision. Yes, so Amin will take us through the general guidelines.
Yep. If we can just quickly hop back to the previous slide,
Yeah,
which talks about the public clarification that was issued, upon the issuance of this cabinet decision. Now, the public clarification obviously expands on what the cabinet decision was
yeah,
saying. It's given us a bit more depth on what the FDA intends to tell us. Now, the scope of this cabinet decision,
hmm,
needs to be satisfied by either one or two of the following conditions. Now, in say, for example, in condition one, the recipient of these electronic
yeah,
devices should resell these devices either at wholesale or retail. That does not matter.
correct.
If in case they're purchased for one-off use or for employees' internal, consumption or for sale to the employees, then obviously this decision will not be met, and
Correct.
the supplier will have to charge 5% VAT on such supplies.
Yeah, even I would like to add one more example. Even if a business, registered business, is buying these products from a seller for further selling to one-off transaction to their employees against
Hmm.
against a charge to them, then also this decision will not be applicable, because it says that it should be the business of the recipient, like the selling of electronic devices or manufacturing or production should be the main business activity of the business of the recipient. So again, if this condition is not met, obviously this decision will not be applicable. Moving on to the next condition.
Yeah. So in the next condition, again, there is a slight change. Now this decision will also be applicable in case we purchase or the recipient of these electronic devices purchases these, devices for incorporating or for using them in producing and manufacturing
Mhm.
any other electronic device. Now, this production does not need to be the final production. It can also
Yeah,
be a partial production of electronic
it could be
devices.
partial. Yeah,
Right. And if we have a look at the example that we have provided below, we have a supplier of certain electronic devices, which is, I think, the mobile phone screens.
yeah,
Right now, these mobile phone screen manufacturer will supply these screens to us, manufacturer of actual mobile phone
mm,
devices,
mm,
which will
mm,
then they'll incorporate these into one final device and sell the same to the customer.
customer.
Now, in this case, on each step, the decision should be applicable because
Yeah,
we meet condition number two.
yeah, which is a partial manufacturing or production of the electronic devices.
Correct.
Yeah. So moving on to the next slide.
Which we'll come on to the key takeaways from the public clarification.
Yeah. So now let's talk about the documentary and compliance requirements, which comes with this decision. So first, as we discussed earlier, a declaration mandatorily needs to be there from the recipient to the seller, and along. So now, what will happen? The recipient transaction comes and becomes effective for a transaction. The seller will not charge any VAT output on the supply. However, the recipient will account for the same under their books of accounts and under RCM mechanism. And however, the seller still needs to raise a tax invoice, which will be like under Article 59. However, one condition needs to be met, which is like we have to mention this invoice is being issued under RCM mechanism, and the recipient needs to account for VAT. So now we'll start with the what all is covered under electronic devices. Aman, can you please run us through what
Yeah,
is covered?
so we have mobile phones. Now, the definition of mobile phones should be interpreted in a very narrow manner. I mean, in a very broad manner, sorry. It includes not only smartphones, but also mobile devices, which, are whose basic function is just to call or text. Now, if we look at, telephones that we might have at home that are connected by an optical or fiber cable, these are specifically not covered under the public clarification or under this cabinet decision. Um, However, in terms of like computer devices or laptops, there is no distinction made between wireless transmission or wired
Hmm.
transmission. Both of these devices, laptops, desktop PCs, tablets, and smartwatches, everything is covered under this cabinet decision. Now, the last part, which pertains to parts and pieces of these electronic devices, will be mentioned in the ensuing slides. However, there is a question that pops up here, whether there'll be no a difference in the tax treatment in case of a composite supply or a single supply.
That comes when there is a separate charge for an assembly
Mm,
service or some other manufacturing service. Service charges are there attached to the electronic devices. Then this question obviously comes into picture. But the answer is very simple to this. If you are selling your products as a composite supply,
mhm.
then the tax treatment of the main supply will follow, which is the electronic devices. So now this decision will be applicable on the whole composite value. However, if you are separately charging the service charge or the
Mhm.
assembly charges, then that decision would not be applicable on that particular amount of the value of the service.
Right. So basically, we'll have to follow the composite supply rules and have a look on the
Yeah,
individual pricing.
correct. So
Great.
that will obviously depend on case to case basis also.
Obviously,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the
Um,
next slide, which we now will discuss, is ministerial decision number 262, which came was issued on 25th of October,
mhm.
and which specified what all parts and pieces will be covered under these decisions. Yeah.
So there are basically, the on a brief, the ministerial decision has split into two inclusions and two exclusions.
Yeah.
Now the inclusions are basically, the pieces and parts that are normally used in the process, of manufacturing and making electronic devices, and that is not, necessary for the operation of the electronic device as well. And the second inclusion is pieces and parts that are not normally used in the production of electronic devices and uh, manufacturing of those devices, but they are actually necessary for their operation as well. Now this might include examples such as cables, chargers, or monitors, external peripherals, etc. Now, the coming on to the exclusions part, these parts and pieces. Now, this focuses more towards parts and pieces that are used towards the manufacturing of electronic devices, but they are not necessary for
For
their
the
operation.
function. Yeah.
Correct. So this might be limited to not limited to, but this may include selfie sticks,
Accessories, phone
accessories.
cases. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is basically they just enhance the enjoyment of the electronic device, but they aren't required for the necessary operation or its functioning.
Function. Yeah.
Right. And the last exclusion is specifically SIM cards and smart cards of similar nature. This, even though they are necessary for the operation of certain mobile devices, has clearly been specified by the FDA that these would fall outside the scope of this decision.
Yeah. So now moving on to the next slide, which is public clarification VATP 035, which further explains the administrative decision, wherein we have categorically explain what will be the normal parts and pieces required for the normal production or normal functioning of the electronic devices. So first, they have bifurcated the public clarification have bifurcated three criterias. So first criteria being the electronic devices normally used in the manufacturing or production and are necessary for the normal operation. So this means the parts, the pieces and parts that are normally used for the manufacturing or production, and they are necessary for the normal operation of the electronic devices also. Like let's suppose, given an example, if you buy a, mobile phone which has some crystals or diamonds embedded on it, so that means they are generally embedded while the production. Okay, but that is not, you to be used mandatorily for the production. So now that electronic device will not be covered or will not be eligible to get the benefit of this decision.
Hmm.
Then second on, yeah, moving on to the next criteria or give,
No,
I
I
mean, if
think
you can
because
give us,
there are
yeah,
some specific examples. If we can go back to the previous
yeah,
slide, so coming on to the condition where we come to where we state that these parts are necessary for the use and production, of other electronic devices. Mobile phones, you could take these as coils,
yeah,
microchips,
hmm,
any other internal processes that, without which the mobile phone would not be able to function.
yeah,
Now, in the case of computers, it does get a bit tricky,
yeah,
as right, obviously laptops have inbuilt keyboards and
hmm,
mice, which should be covered under this
correct,
condition. But now, if you come to desktop PCs, they have external peripherals. They have
hmm,
external keyboards, external mices, external monitors. So those technically are not necessarily used, but they are necessary for the
the
operation.
operation,
So
yeah,
those actually be get covered in the second criteria. Now, if we move on to the next slide, the second criteria now states that these pieces and parts, as we mentioned earlier, will not be necessary or normally used for the production
yeah,
or manufacturing of these electronic devices, but without which these devices will not be able to function
function,
perfectly. Right? Some of these examples may include, mobile phone chargers and cables.
yeah,
Obviously, they aren't normally produced for each and every mobile phone, but without which they
they
wouldn't be able to
function,
operate.
yeah.
And similarly, as we discussed in point one, the external peripherals such as your monitors and keyboards for your desktop PCs. Now we do have the third criteria.
Which is like linked to the previous two criteria
Yep.
only. So whatever parts and pieces fulfill the above two criterias will be
Mhm.
eligible to be a part of this decision. Otherwise, yes, they will follow the normal tax treatment, which will be like normal 5% VAT.
Exactly. So this decision has been applied, or where RCM has applied for any parts and pieces in criteria one or two, any replacement of the same part basically makes up your criteria three.
Yeah. So just to sum up, like if this decision is applicable for an electronic device, then the supplier will not be should not charge any VAT, but mandatorily needs to get a declaration from the registered recipient and verify their TRN. If they are not able to get that declaration, then the seller will charge normal 5% VAT on the transactions and issue a tax invoice to the recipient. But the key point here is the recipient will not be able to recover input VAT
Mhm.
on the same. Why? Because the conditions to recover input VAT states like the input, like the expenses are incurred towards making taxable supply. So if this recipient is not able to give the declaration like that the goods will be used for reselling,
Basically,
or
the
maybe
intention is
yeah,
not clear.
intention is
Yeah.
not clear. Secondly, if they are not registered, then there is no point of recovering the input.
Hmm.
So the in a crux nutshell, the decision will be applicable only when these two conditions are mandatorily complied to. And one more thing I want to add on here. This decision will not be applicable to the transactions or the goods which are exported outside the UAE. So those are categorically excluded from this decision because those are to be exported outside the UAE, and the normal conditions and the normal provisions of Article 30 would be applicable, and all the commercial and official documents will be mandatorily required for the same. Now, moving to the next slide, which is the way forward action points, we have summed up some action points from the perspective of suppliers
Hmm.
and the recipients of the electronic devices. So, first, being for the supplier, we need to get, as I mentioned earlier, a signed declaration from the customer along with their TRN. Now, this TRN needs to be verified on the FTA website. Then, the issue of the tax invoice, as we mentioned earlier, the tax invoice should have all the particulars as per Article 59, with with a condition mentioned like the tax will be taken care by the recipient under RCM mechanism. And majorly, what our clients are also facing challenges in is the system change.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there could be chance like one electronic devices might be covered under this decision, and one transaction they might not be.
They might not be. Yeah.
So the system mapping is the challenge, like the biggest challenge which the industry is facing currently after
Definitely.
issuance of this decision. Now, from recipient perspective, Aman, if you can just run us through the
Yes,
action
so
points.
it runs hand in hand with the the implications that are there on the suppliers. Now, as a recipient, for me to actually show the intention or to claim the input tax corresponding to these electronic devices, as Gurleen had mentioned earlier, we need to send over a signed declaration
Yeah.
to the customer, to the supplier, sorry, stating the intention that we either need to resell these goods or we'll use it for internal
Mhm.
purposes, whatever it is, and we'll take the appropriate tax treatment. Now, they also need to give a declaration stating that they're registered for
VAT.
VAT. However, these declarations don't need to be separate.
Yeah,
The
we can.
FD has clarified it can be one single
Yeah.
declaration confirming both the points. And then obviously we'll have to change our accounting standards and the way we account such
Mhm.
transactions under reverse charge instead
Yeah,
of a
because
normal purchase.
for recipient also there could be two instances wherein one electronic device will be covered under this
Exactly.
decision, and the other, for the same electronic device, same purchases, the same will not be covered under this decision, and normal 5% VAT will be applicable. So the system mapping will be a challenge from both buyer and seller perspective.
Definitely.
It was really nice having you here, and thank you for your time, taking out the morning time, especially for us. And wish you a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good day.
So, yes, thank you all for your time today.